Harmony is a very unique place in the world. It's a town of 800 that supports the arts. There are 5 galleries here, and there's also a very rich history of utopian ideals and thoughts. We have been able to get a Richard Meyer building in New Harmony. It's one of his first buildings. It was started in 1975, and it's called the Athenaeum, and it's the visitor center of New Harmony. We also have a Philip Johnson roofless church that I believe was started in the 1960s. And we have many historic buildings from the 1800s that were homes or schoolhouses or churches. Mr. Dougherty was contacted by my predecessor about 5 years ago, and they built a relationship, and they were constantly trying to work out a way to get Mr. Dougherty here. And when my predecessor left, the university took control and put Mr. Dougherty on the exhibition schedule. And then when I came into my position, I was able to raise the funds to bring Mr. Dougherty here through the IAC, which is the Indiana Arts Commission, and from the Blaffer Foundation, as well as private individuals in New Harmony and Evansville. What makes Patrick Dougherty's work significant is the scale. It's temporary, but it also has a lifespan longer than a lot of temporary art. It has about a 2-year lifespan, whereas other contemporary environmental artists will have, moments even, not years. He has taken our historic Main Street and he has made it into a contemporary sculpture. So he's taken the different aspects of New Harmony and put those into the sculpture, and I think that's why it works so well here in New Harmony.
I'm a documented case of downward mobility. I started out as an undergraduate English literature major, and much to my parents' chagrin, and finally went into hospital administration, which was going to be my big break. But it seemed like that the carpenters were having more fun. And so as I looked out my window on a daily basis, I had a more and more jaundiced view of the job. Finally decided I would move from that to building a house. I built a house of my own, and then became a house husband and did that for about 10 years, and then finally went back to school in sculpture, went through evening college, and just spent about 2 years at the art lab every day. Grinding my teeth, trying to figure out what I was doing. I don't feel like I ever made anything in school, actually. At the last minute, the last possible minute, there was the student show, and I made something on my picnic table. It was a big stick thing, and I carried it and nobody said anything, so I didn't think it was any good. But it turned out to be, everyone was really holding back, and I thought it was a fantastic piece of work. So how did you think about making this? I don't really know. So it's inexplicable how I decided to make a stick thing. I immediately saw the potential of it, and I think what that meant was looking at my own interior and my deeper needs in life and ruminations, and then started making things that really had a lot of meaning to me. Throughout my childhood, I played with sticks and made forts and so forth. Maybe it's just gotten out of hand as an adult. I've worked in 3 different ways. I've worked using architecture as the basis for working, because I can get a good stable structure to work on. I've worked with trees, using the limbs to put limbs back on it. In this case, it's in Denmark, and I just gathered across the street from this place. The third way I've worked is that oftentimes now, and in this case, I'm kind of doing a little bit of both, but I'm often given spaces now that there's no support structure for me to hook onto. I want to please my sponsors, but the person that I feel is my audience is the person that has no vested interest in it, the person that's driving down the street or that rounds the corner, the UPS guy, just all the normal people of the world. I feel like that I have to make a piece of work that works for an art critic, an intellectual, but also has resonance for the most normal person, And I think that sometimes we undersell
just regular people and think they don't have the capacity or they wouldn't understand something, and I just don't believe that. I think that a good piece of work really calls upon the best in everyone and should stir up a lot of associations.
I think I contain all my past pieces. They're temporary. I'm very interested in process. I'm very interested in rolling the image from one place to the other and let the site itself be very deterministic about what I make there. That's why the images vary so much, is because I basically rely on my association with the site. What do I think of when I'm there? It might not make any sense, but whatever I think of when I'm standing there is a kind of composite feeling, and that's what determines how I start to work. In terms of the materials themselves, I'm very expedient about materials. I'm not a craftsman. The work is well crafted, but I don't have any skills about, oh, I only work this way with sticks, or I only work that. Half the time I don't even really know what I'm doing. And then I discover a way of working with this particular set of sticks that starts working for me, and I'll start working in that way. So I'm not really tied to any one material or really any one way of working. I'm tied to what seems effective at that time that I'm working with that set of sticks or with that situation. And I don't like it when people suggest, oh, I will collect all the materials for you. I say, no, let me collect them, because there's a kind of pre-work that's going on there. One, you're seeing how those materials feel in their real natural setting. And a lot of times just the way they are is quite suggestive of the way that you might work with them. The way the limbing patterns work, the way that, that even sometimes a kind of suggestion based on some configuration of trees that you see, or some way that something lays, or some line patterns that you see, might be a shadow, or any number of things that you would key off of and say, I could work that way. Oh, yeah, that would be good.
I try to choose placement, a good placement for, which is not as big of an issue, but say on a college campus, if you have a big area, walkover area, big field, if you put the sculpture out in the middle, no one will go out there, because there's a kind of an embarrassment about making the first move. Now, if there are children out there playing, then people will walk right out there, because the children kind of break the ice. So a lot of times I will sit the thing within, say, 4 feet of the sidewalk, so that somebody will kind of do this for their first move. And then once they get in, then they're released to it, and then they'll walk around. And if other people see them, then they'll come over there and walk around too. So you have to be a little bit strategic and think about it, about what's going to get people's attention. When I've teased people up to the piece through openings and then the use of line, then I want them to have further levels of inspection. So the insides and the line quality, and it needs to work from both this far away and from 50 feet or 100 feet away. Sometimes I think the failure of big public sculptures are, one, that the scale is not fit the space. They were designed in one place and not built there. And the second thing is that people can't associate very easily with them. They're more of an intellectual endeavor to make an association with a sculpture. And luckily for me, I like lots of different kinds of sculpture, and I think it's great that there's pluralistic efforts, that lots of people are doing lots of different things. But I think it does help the acceptance of my sculpture that people have certain personal feelings about it. Work has got to resonate with me personally. So I first got to like it and be excited by it. But I think the impact on the viewer often is based in the fact that they can personally own it. My first sculpture that I made, my big sculpture, was called From Hedges to Hirshhorn. But I'm not at the Hirshhorn yet, but I would like to be. Then I can say from Hirshhorn to Hedges. There's lots of great spaces. Lots of great spaces in Europe, lots of great spaces in the United States. One thing about having a work at a prominent space like the Whitney or something is that a lot more people see it. And so I'm really intensely interested in that, and that helps your career a bit and helps you get more work, because you always need work.
one thing I've never really been that worried about art history. I thought art history would have to take care of itself, and that the best thing for me to do was just to work and to be able to work every day as an artist. And so I wasn't really that concerned about physical objects. I imagined most of the objects are in bank basements and other places that are not getting that much attention. So the trade-off was with using spaces that had not been identified as art spaces, and being able to really use these spaces in a great way and getting a lot of attention for the piece, and kind of immediate attention, and then having the piece go away. I kind of like sticking it to the traditional ideas about sculpture, and just the idea of that you really can't own it, that it's good for not just the people that bought it, but it's good for it's accessible to everyone, that it's on a street corner, and it's got to be effective, but you know that it because it's there and it's temporary and it's available. Also the idea that there's a kind of consistency between the material in its own life and the sculpture itself, so that there's I think that adds to its credibility, that you would use this material in a way, use the inherent properties of the material, that is that the sticks entangle with one another is the way that these things go together. You don't tie it, you just do it, you just pick it up and you stick it together like this, it holds. And then the consistency about its lifetime. The sticks rot, they go back to the earth, they become mulch or whatever, fertilizer for the next thing. So I really don't get too upset about the temporary nature, and I think that I do kind of carry around this reservoir of all the pieces that I've made. There is a way that you feel like you start over each time, and in fact, I have this blackout between pieces, and I see the new site and I wonder if I've ever worked. I don't even know why I'm there, almost, So I have to kind of overcome that blank spot and then jump into a sense of interest in the new work. And part of that is that I don't know what other people's keys are, but my key is that when I touch those sticks, or I see sticks, I see potential. And so all I have to do is just go into the woods and start picking them up, and I start going, oh yeah, now I could use that one. This would be good for this. And so there's a way that the materials themselves are so evocative for me that I just seem to have a kind of an open line of credit there. I'm like, yeah, I could do something with this. I have a pair of clippers that I use, and that's what I bring with me. And then we usually buy a pair of loppers. Sometimes I bring a pair of loppers and a small saw, and that's really all you need to do it. It's not a very complicated, very low-tech way of working. It comes down to endorphins, because of people looking for satisfaction in all professions. When you're really on the money, when it's feeling, why you feel like your job is satisfying, is that you're producing a kind of intensity that might relate to making endorphins that make you feel really good when you've reached that state. And that's one of the states that I feel like that I reach quite often, where I feel like that I'm very unself-conscious, but I'm fully myself and really feel capable. I'm not satisfied unless I'm frightening myself to death. And generally I take too big of a bite. I plan for the space and not for my own convenience. I want the space to have the kind of energy that it deserves. So there's this way that I didn't have to do the whole hedge. I could have just done one piece. But maybe we need that. Maybe we need the kind of energy that of this long linear thing, just like the main street is kind of long and linear, then we need this long linear thing to kind of fill the hedge up. Where would you stop? How are you going to start midway in the hedge? You kind of need the whole thing. And so that allowed a lot of permutations of the same object. So I suffer for about 2 days in each installation while I'm trying to get my, one thing is my mind's still back in North Carolina and my body's here, and so how do you get your two things together? And then you're presented with new people and you don't know any of them, you don't know what their capacities are, so you're a little bit, you don't know where your material's coming from, so you're a little bit anxiety ridden there. But what you have to do as a professional is to maintain a sense of calm, as though you know what you're doing. And you know what a professional of any sort is somebody that can say yes even though they don't know what it is that they're going to do. I would like to do work that lots of people could see, that not just one person owned, and that it could become just the personal and private view of several people. So I like making work that appeals to the general public. I work in public all the time, and my interaction with the public is a secondary gain to my work. It's not really what my work is about. I wouldn't say, hey, I'm a performance artist, I work in public. I simply work in public and talk to the public all the time. And so if I'm working on a sidewalk, people are asking me what I'm doing. They're saying, what are you doing here? When you bring a big pile of sticks, they say, I'm going to call the police. And it may be the same people that are going to call the police that a week or 2 weeks later are saying, I really like this pretty good. You want to come over for dinner? So there's different levels of but at first it always happens, though. People will say, these trees are not going to grow. Or you're torturing those trees. I said, well, we made this thing. We put it here. You did not. Or the classic is, did you get this in the mountains? Like that somehow the mountains contains all those things that are hidden, and that we could go up to the mountains and find something that is inexplicable and bring it down. And I'll say, no, I didn't find it in the mountains. We made that thing here. I thought that temporary work or work that uses natural materials would be just very short-lived. But what's really happened is that people's concerns about the environment in our era and their increased interest in gardening in the United States has made a lot more people interested in natural-based sculpture. And so you're finding zoos, you're finding botanical gardens, you're finding all kinds of museums all over the United States saying, hey, we have 100 acres here. Why don't we start a sculpture park and we'll put some regular sculpture, but what we want is some natural, we want some sculptures that are going to fade away here as well. We want to do some temporary work. So this is a phenomenon that's happening everywhere. And I'm just riding the crest of that interest, and it's both interior, exterior, children's museums. There's just lots of places that are keenly interested in this. Part of it is, I believe, that people are ready for ephemeral work. They're just really tired of the hard edge work, and they like work that seems more tentative. I would say that it's related to my sculpture, my favorite sense, or having a sense of things, because one is touching things is important to me, but these sculptures have smell as well, and so I love knowing the smells of different trees. When you mass those leaves up, and I know what an oak smells like, I know what willow smells like, I know what maple smells like. So that's a pleasure, and just the fact that you can touch the bark of these twigs, and there's just kind of an energy level that you feel it comes into your hand. It's really a kind of a mental thing. It's not a metaphysical thing, but I feel very energized by touching these sticks and by the smells of them. An artist has to be careful who they take their cues from, because you might work for one curator and a year later she calls you up and she says, are you doing something else? Like, I like your work, but why aren't you doing the same? Are you doing something else now? Because I'll give you another show if you're working differently. I said, no, I'm doing the same work. And the reason is that I haven't worn it out. It's still, I think that by taking my cues from different sites, that I still come up with new things, lots of new things every year, you know, and I'm not a hack yet. And so I think that that's, you know, as long as you're accomplished and you're able to make new things that tend to excite people, you know, it's not that I can lean back and say, oh, I've made these 200 things and somebody's got them in their house and they're accruing value and I'm getting a 10% kickback from each sale or something. You know, I've got nothing except my ability to work and to react to sites. And so that's what I'm really interested in.
Like sculpture, and probably for painting too, is it's a problem-solving event in which you're kind of problem-solving a kind of an aesthetic approach to something, a space. And so there's this constant interplay between what you see and what you're trying to do, and you basically put down a base coat or something on your canvas, and then you're kind of working back and forth between it. And one of the things that did affect me in the early 80s, you know, painting was bigger than sculpture, and what they said about painting was that painting was more immediate, that you got more of the real thing, whatever the real thing was, and that sculpture at that time was coming from the minimalist point of view, and before that abstract expressionist, but a lot of that was stacked metal things, you know. And so they said, well, God, you know, you just draw it out a little bit and you send it to somebody else to solve the problems. You're not getting the real thing. And so it had an effect on me, and I chose a way of working that I feel like is very reactive and is a lot like drawing and painting, and a little less like, you know, like overly planned sculpture. Everybody has the scale at which they feel comfortable working. For me, it's working with my entire self, you know. What's really interesting to me is to take a big public space that doesn't have anything there, that really may be almost a guerrilla space or a hidden space in the public, that they couldn't have imagined this thing appearing, and then, you know, doing something that looks like that it truly is part of the space, whether it's an interior space or an exterior space, and you think, now that really fits for different reasons. Interiorly, you say, well, look at the contrast between this work and contemporary architecture. You say, well, this is an ancient way of working, this is contemporary architecture, there's a reciprocity here, you know. Or when you're outside and you're working in trees, you know, it's kind of a joke in a way to put sticks back on sticks, you know. So I just think there's a lot of inherent interest in working in large scale, and you know, to some degree, people will say, well, bigger is not better, but sometimes something that fits its space well, that has the right scale, and that you're able to come up with that scale because you're there, and you take a full measure of that space, and then you start having a kind of feeling. You say, you know, this is not tall enough, this is too short, this is too tall, and that you're able to adjust the scale while making, I think, is a very interesting part of this work.
It's awesome. This is an awesome idea, and it's so unique, and it's very original.
I think it looks like Blair Witch, which is a good thing.
Yeah, it is very eye-catching.
I like it. I think I like to throw out a sleeping bag and spend the night.
And my daughter and her husband and little boy lives here in New Harmony, and on our way to their house, I saw this. And then we went to a restaurant to eat, and I got a brochure on this. And it's beautiful, isn't it?
It looks different from every angle. And when you go inside, you can smell it. And all the wood and the dying bushes and the living ones all together.
It's unusual. How else can I say it? When he was talking a while ago, you pick up a stick and you wonder what you're going to do with that stick, you know? And this is what he does with his sticks. So that's kind of all in a nutshell right there.
It's amazing to think that someone could enrich a town like this already with all the great things it has, but it really has. And I just, everything about it, it's of the earth, and it's art, and here we got a real artistic community right here in the middle of an agricultural area that's in tune with the seasons, and I just think it's wonderful. I wish it could stay here forever, although, you know, it's not probably supposed to either. That's all part of it, you know, and we're going to enjoy it while it's here, that's for sure.
I like the way it looks. I like it has a really neat effect when you look at it. Very artistic.
Kind of like having a little hideout. When you were children, you always made a little special place in the bushes of trees, and that's kind of what it gives you the feel for. It's really neat.
It also reminds me of bird nests, how birds would live in it, and it's just a large human-scale bird's nest.
What was I thinking? Well, I was thinking that this hedge would serve as a nice green roof to what appears to be a kind of a cliff-dwelling idea about you would have these little living spaces kind of emerging from underneath this green canopy. And maybe it was kind of the first way of building. New Harmony is known for all of these architectural works that are here, but this was maybe man's first kind of architecture. So it's good to include it. I had 7 students work with me from the local university, and they came and worked in the morning and in the afternoon, and we thought we might not get finished, but lo and behold, the thing did get finished within its appointed time.